My name is Rupert Hambira. I'm a church minister with the United Congregational Church of Southern Africa, and I am a descendant of the Herero victims of the genocide of 1904 to 1908. I currently live in Botswana. All the people that survived the genocide have virtually died. The first and second generation of their children have also died. I belong to the third generation that almost lost everything. We do not speak Ovaherero, nor do we understand the Ovaherero culture really. I was introduced to the Holy Fire for the first time in my life yesterday in Windhoek. That's how acculturized we are. That's how much we have lost our identity, our culture, our language. I do not even want to begin to talk about the rest of the other losses that we went through. I am in Botswana. It's not because I want to be there. It is because I have seen no reason to return to the land of death, where my people were virtually killed out. But that's who I am.
My name is Kamutuua Kandorozu. I'm coming from South Africa. I'm also the third generation of my forebears who ran away after the brutality of the German Ovaherero War from the then German Southwest Africa. They went through Botswana. Ultimately, they went to South Africa under the leadership of the three chiefs, which is David Kaunyonywa Kambadembi, Matthews Humu Mutate, and the warrior Samuel Maharero. Both the chiefs, Kaunyonywa and Humu, died in South Africa. They are buried there. In 1921, Chief Samuel Maharero decided to come back to Botswana because he was willing and have appetite to come back home. Unfortunately, the 1919 Versailles Peace Treaty of France in Versailles, he couldn't, because South Africa then was awarded to rule or administrate the German Southwest Africa. My parents, or let me say my grandfathers and grandmothers, they told how on foot they were suffering the long walk, about 2,000 kilometers, which they walked through Botswana. First, they resided in Tsau, in Botswana, until they went up to Maung, and then they went through to Seruwe, into South Africa, now called Limpopo province. Some of our people, they've ran away or they flew through Mafikeng in South Africa to Vryburg, Ganyesa, Tlakameng, and Morokwe. We are affected by this war because most of us, we can't speak languages, the Herero or Nama language. We are suffering because of what happened to our ancestors. We have a problem of identification even on foreign land, which gives us a very difficult, if I may say, difficult integration with other indigenous people in those countries. Every time our kids, they will say, why is that have happened to our people to be in Botswana and South Africa? Why not in Namibia? We always have a problem of identity, as I have said, and our kids, they can't even speak the language. They can't even be part of their motherland, where originally their families are coming. So this backlog has a tremendous effect on our people. The Germans, even though we are not part of the discussions, we find ourselves be excluded in the dialogue, which actually we are affected by this war, even more than the Namibians themselves, because we are living in the foreign land. We have to adapt to all those circumstances which actually the Germans should compensate for the reparation and other losses. My colleague here was saying we don't even begin to know our culture, but when we visit among our people, we realize that really the loss is even bigger than what we thought about. Yes. Our old people, our grandmothers, they were telling us when the war started how they ran away. Some of them have been raped by the German troops. Some of them, they were killed. They lost their own brothers and sisters through the war. Some of them, they have lost the kids, which also belong to the Germans. Some of them, they have also lost their own sisters and brothers. When they don't know whether they have died or whether they were confiscated with German troops or whether they were repatriated, as we know that some of the skulls are coming from Germany, so we don't know what happened to them. Only to realize now then all the background history which our forebears were telling us, we realized that some of the things are very true, because I was part of the mission to Berlin to bring back the skulls of our people. Yes. You can ask question. Any question you want to ask, then we can respond.
You can ask again.
Okay. The question that I wanted to ask is, how did your parents lost the kids? How did you lost the brothers and sisters that were taken to Germany? Can you elaborate more on that?
Yes. What we were told by our grandmothers is that we lost most of our kids in the war situation, where they murdered the mother and the kids didn't have somebody to suck milk from. And the Germans, they will play with those kids, throwing them to each other like a basketball, taking photos with the dead, and then those people, those kids were also taken to concentration camp. We don't know that here in Swakopmund, where the interview is taking place, we have unmarked graves which we don't know who are buried there. Some, because of their color of the skin, the Germans will associate with them and they will take those kids back in Germany to Berlin. So it's how they told us. most of the children, especially the women who were raped, some of them, they were even born in Botswana and South Africa. If you can see myself and Mr. Hambira here, we are whitish in color. So there's a lot of possibilities that we are direct descendants of Germans than the Herero themselves. So it's how the brutality has happened and how the effect of losing brothers and sisters through the war. Yes, I know of a lot of people who went through, who when I was born, I find them there still alive, who told up this story. But we must know it was difficult for them to relate all the information to us because they didn't want us to know how they suffered actually. But in our own research and our own information, what you call information sharing, we are able to put together the knots ourselves in the researches, how our people suffered. But yes, that's why in South Africa, we also not want to sit down and wait for anything. Ourselves, we are organizing trips for our own kids to learn and our own kids to understand this trail of long walk of our people from here in Okahanja through Ohamakadi, through Oshinene, towards the desert, passing the desert through Botswana, ultimately landing in South Africa. Our kids, we want to have a draw of information between our kids to relate to each other so that they learn and they also want a closure from all these happenings. But unfortunately, the Germans, they don't play with us in terms of assisting in the development of our people in diaspora. Only what they want to relate to is the government and only people in Namibia, which for us, we still maintain that the people who brutally affected by the war is ourselves, because we have lost virtually everything. Everything, our tradition, our language, our being as people has been lost. So although they give Namibia Developmental Fund, but they forgot about us in the diaspora, who we think we are direct beneficiaries to any development money or financial assistance which is given to Namibia. Yes, that is our stance in the diaspora, that we feel that even the dialogue which Germany is taking with the Namibian government and some of people in Namibia is not enough. We want a sort of triangular dialogue between ourselves, representing ourselves. I think we are very much capable to do that. And through our paramount chief, who is supportive of us in diaspora than any other person in this country, Namibia.
Can I add one question? How have your grandparents told you how the situation was when the German troops and the German settlers arrived? What have your grandparents told you about how they lived when the Germans arrived, and then also how the conflict started and what happened?
Yes. I will speak more for the Hereros, and I think Reverend Hambira will even say more about the Nama people. Yes. The Hereros, they were very peaceful people. The central Southwest Africa was belonging to them. We are talking about Omaruru, Okahanja, Oshomise, which is Windhoek, Oshiwarongo, Okakarara, Oshinene. We talk about up to Tsumeb. Those areas in Omaheke region, those areas in Aminus, those areas in Marintal, they will belong to Hereros. So that vast land, they could have abundance of grazing land for the cattle and their small farm animals. They could enjoy the land to plant and grow some millis and all those things. So what they told us actually, they were peaceful until the German settlers, they arrived in this country. And they were sporadic fighting among the indigenous people, but it was not a big thing because they were fighting for grazeland for their animals. So when the Germans came, they started to take things bit by bit until they see that no, it is not, enough is enough. They must start challenging these Germans. The ministries also played a role of bringing Christianity to them. You must know that those times, there were only people who belonged to their own culture and tradition, and they didn't practice the Christianity per se. But they brought that Christianity, and that Christianity also brought some problems to them because they were killed, even they were in the churches. So a lot of our people, they were killed in the churches, and when they preach the Bible, they preach God's word, and making plans and killing our people. So they were telling us how this brought also division, the Christianity and those who practice tradition. Those conflict among the people, the Germans, they use it to divide them. So it's how they told us how they did it. They divided the Hereros so that the Hereros can fight among themselves. And even in the war situation, when they were running, some of the people, even before the extermination order of Luther von Trotter, we were told that the Germans, they could capture some of the people to fight against their own people. So it's how they told us. So they couldn't trust themselves, even on the fighting, on their running, that some of the people, they could give information in terms of tracks of the Ovahereros, in terms of the water wells, so that they can poison those wells and things like that. Because Germans, they couldn't know the whole country because they were also foreigners in this country. So they used Hereros to divide themselves in order to get them. It's how they told us the history and how sufferings during the whole route they could have because of German. And fortunately enough for those who could go through Botswana, the Germans couldn't go to the English territory. So they were lucky to have reached Botswana. And Botswana, we were told also by them, at that time, they suffered drought, as this year we are suffering the drought, and they couldn't plant grains for themselves and things like that. So obviously, they suffered again another backlog when they arrived in Botswana. That's why some of them, they were forced to go to South Africa to work in the mines in the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, and it's how they survived, some of them, to get money and bring money back to home for those who are in Namibia.
Maybe you can go in for those who went to South Africa. When they went to South Africa, how was they treated there?
Okay. The people who ran into South Africa, they arrived there in 1907, majority of them, under the leadership of, as I said, of David Kaunyonyoa Kampadembi as their chief, Matthews Mutate Humu, and later Samuel Maharero joined them. And in a very remote rural area of the then Transvaal, the northern Transvaal, and then because at those farms they couldn't have any business or any business activities there. So Samuel Maharero was forced to select men who are able to go to work in the mines. They suffered a very setback in terms of the land in South Africa. The 2 farms which they were staying in was donated by these mines to stay on those farms, only in the proviso of giving laborer to the mine. So the 1913 Land Act in South Africa forced them to leave those farms because the act itself was pronouncing that no more than 5 families could stay in the one farm. So they then dispersed to other farms, and ultimately they also have to work what you call 3 months laborer in the farms in order to work to stay in the farm. So they must sell their laborer for them to stay in the farm. So yes, it was not an easy thing, and that's why that poverty spell over to even to us. We are living in very challenging circumstances, even today with the independence of South Africa. The minority groups like ourselves, our languages are not taught in schools, so it's very difficult for us to survive or to even to know our own languages. So yes, however, things are much better with the liberation of South Africa, but our communities are still living in that poverty-stricken areas, even today.
And perhaps you can also enlighten us, as I have also heard through my great-grandparents, that they used to communicate through songs because they were not allowed to talk their own languages.
Yeah. Yes, especially in the evenings. And those who practice Christianity, they took along a very, what I can call valuable book of hymns, which they could song and sing throughout the night. And it's how some of them, because of there were no schools, they could also learn to write in the evenings, to write their own languages. There's no school even myself. I can write Ovaherero because I have inherited everything from them. Because even the songs has a certain messages which could go through their hearts and their soul to ascertain themselves that they're still alive, because they couldn't even believe they're still alive after the war effects.
Could you sing the song, or is it you don't like just one line maybe, or is
What?
it
Sorry?
If
Sorry?
you could sing?
No, I can't sing.
You cannot sing?
Unfortunately, I have no that gift. Yeah, I have a lot of gifts, but not one of the sing. Maybe my brother here can also a little bit sing, but yeah.
Maybe also hear your story. I
Yeah.
would just,
Yeah.
because you're from South Africa, shortly know like how big
So
is the
the
exile community there? About how many Herero are living there now?
when the Ovaherero arrived, they were a very small group of people. One can say around 200, 300 communities which came to South Africa. But with the time, since 1907, people have grown. I'm talking about Limpopo province. When you bring the Ovaherero in certain areas like the Northern Cape and the Northwest province of South Africa, you'll find a formidable number of people there. Even I don't know, in number, there are even majority in our area in South Africa, that area. We are speaking about altogether with the intermarriages with the Tswana people, the other people in South Africa, we are talking about 15,000 people now. Yes, the direct descendants of Ovaherero in South Africa. Yeah, plus minus there, 15,000. Yes.
Thank you. So we change.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about how the people died. Like he said, many of them died because of hardships. In the case of the people that fled east from here into Botswana and later South Africa, they were pushed first into the Namib desert, which is still lifeless today. So thousands died in the desert. They crossed over into another desert, a little less harsher, the Kalahari, yet infested with wild animals, lions, tigers, wolves, and every other thing you can imagine. These wild animals killed them in large numbers. It literally had easy targets, human targets. Many of the people died from drinking water from poisoned wells, as my brother said. And some, even those that survived, died upon arrival or soon after arrival in the diaspora. Many of them died. There is a small place in Botswana. It is called Eerste Rest, the first rest out of the German rule. Eerste Rest. The Hereros lived there. My own father married his first wife and she died there. He married the second wife, my mother, and just after one birth, my mother also passed on. And so you go to that place today, you see grave upon grave of people that we have not even we are even thinking of identifying that area and putting up a monument to show that people that came here died in large numbers. People also died from other conditions, like TB, that they took from the concentration camps. Many people were infected by TB, and as they were released and went back into the communities, they infected others with TB. So people died in large numbers in Botswana. I think outside of Namibia, the next highest Herero population is in Botswana, where we, I think, are well in excess of 100,000, at least well in excess now, even close to 200,000. There is no district in Botswana that does not have a Herero community, not one district that does not have a Herero community in Botswana. Those to the north of Botswana, still do speak some degree of Ochiherero, though it is also a Tswanalized version. Those of us on the Molopo River to the south have all lost our language. People are even ashamed of identifying themselves as Herero, because being a Herero is a shamed identity of a defeated people, refugees who came begging and were not just working for the whites when they arrived, they also worked for fellow Africans, because that's how poor and desperate they were at that time. So people died from a multiplicity of forces and causes upon their arrival. The village we came to, our first point of arrival in Botswana, it's a village called Tsabong. Tsabong means a place of refuge. So the village was named after our plight, and those that were fleeing from the east, from South Africa, fleeing from the wars of Mfecane. So we can say we are lucky, and we must be quite a hardy people, that we have survived the Germans, and we have survived the deserts, we have survived the cold, we have survived the unemployment, we have survived the various epidemics, and we are here 115 years later to tell the story of our forebears. We count ourselves lucky that this story can still be told. My grandmother remembered Namibia with a deep sense of nostalgia. And she since died in 1970. But that's the only person that I saw that actually managed, that was a survivor, a direct survivor of the genocide. And she said, we came from a country where, because that was the best way she could describe it. We came from a country where the world ends, a land of vast and immeasurable waters, describing the sea. That's what she would say. We came from a country of where the world ends, where the world ends, and a country of vast waters. And me, though, as a child growing up, I thought Southwest Africa was very far. I thought it was a place in heaven, because we were never made to think about that. We were never even made to remember where our parents were coming from, because we talk about it, the Germans would come. We can come from that community that was told, bring them back, dead or alive. The head of a Herero man is this much. The head of a Herero woman is this much. The head of a Herero child is this much. This is why we lost the language. We lost the language because we were forced to lose that language. We could do everything. And so we began to assume names like January, February, April, September, August. Those were the best ways we could identify ourselves, because if you were to say you were a Herero name or Herero surname, you'd be in trouble because of that. So I am today with my brother in the diaspora. We are in fairly peaceful democracies. We are in fairly progressive communities. But no place is like home. We are still foreigners. We are still refugees where we are. Nothing has changed. We are still the wretched of the earth that were vanquished and removed from their motherland. Are we where we are because of choice? No. We've never had a choice. We are not tourists. We are not migrant workers. We are people that were forced and uprooted and have lost everything that we were and that we were supposed to have become. But that's who we are. Basically, that's who we are. Are you going to return to Namibia now that it is independent? Well, there is a government today in Namibia that has benefited from our defeat. People who would have never been in the status that they are today, that are the majority today, that were observers when we were being killed like flies, those people have become the government. And that's not the government, that's not the land that our parents fled from. That's not the land that was meant to be inherited by us and the generation behind us. Those that went into a deal with the Germans, not only now, they went into the deal with the Germans when we were being vanquished. It's Ovambo priests who were hand in hand in the various Lutheran churches with the Germans to have us killed. They would say, as they were running into the desert, they would go 3, 4, 5 days, even a week, and then they would be followed by Germans on horseback and brought back into a church. They would be fed there for a month or two, and then all of a sudden one morning they would be killed, and maybe only 1 or 2 persons will survive to go and tell that story. See, today our women are wearing these long dresses, which for me leaves me with a mixture of feelings. But in the war, that dress was a strategic protection, because children and other young people would run under the dress, and the Germans would think it's only one woman we saw and run away from and leave that one woman to survive. But so that's who we are. We really are. I mean, I went to a school where my language will never be taught. What is education when you go into a school as a little boy? He did the same. And once you go into the school, it is either English or the local language of the dominant group. So you are going to be tested on languages, none of which is your mother tongue, none of which is a language you are speaking at home. That we made it in education itself is a miracle, because we were never meant to win anything. Those of us who survived, the little of us who survived, were meant to provide labor, hard labor for those that survived. So I'm only happy that I'm not bitter. I'm only happy that I'm not here to look for anything. I'm not here even to demand for anything. I'm just here to say, how can we all come together to find a closure to the pain that we have suffered, because we have nothing we can do to reverse the loss that our people have suffered. No amount of money that can be paid will reverse the pain and the loss that we have suffered. We are here to say, because you are human, because you, like us, were created in the image of God, because you are Christian, let us find a common closure. And the Lutheran Church must never distance itself from the suffering that our people went through. It's the church that came before, and it's the church that invited the Germans to say, here is an unoccupied territory. The church in Germany is as guilty as the government in Germany is for what our people have suffered. I wish I could speak to the conscience of the Christian church in Germany that they are part of. We are looking to them to help us find closure to what our people have suffered. We just hope that it will not happen again, not only to the Hereros, but any people, anywhere, where they will have 85% of their population cut down in a most cruel and most inhuman way. And we just hope also that our children will not forget what has happened, so that we ourselves do not perpetuate it on anybody tomorrow. So I'm here to say that today, and I hope that we find a mature solution, most mature solution that represents the time in which we are living, that represents the advances we have made in science and technology and in education, that we will find a solution that suits today, that can be applied. Germans themselves dismantled the Berlin Wall because they were saying that past was imposed on us. Why should they not listen to other people when they say, what you have done to us is wrong, and we need to dismantle the wall you have created between yourselves and ourselves, so that the next generation of our children are not at each other's throats.
So the apology.
My grandmother, my father's mother, was a little baby when they fled. And it was one man, my grandfather, and and his sister, and his wife, it was three people. It was my grandfather, it was his wife, and his sister. In the morning, they said, first day when they woke up in the desert, the Germans shot the man, and the two women escaped with the baby. They ran for the day, and at about lunchtime, they sat down with the Herero calabash to drink milk from it. They had the two women with a baby, and the baby was very light in complexion, though my grandmother was married to a very dark Herero man. So they fled, and they waited. After drinking the milk from the calabash, they forgot the calabash and walked away. After a while, my grandmother says to her sister-in-law, "Sister, I forgot my calabash." And she runs back for it to go and pick it. Just as she comes to the point where they were sitting, the Germans shot her also. So my grandmother then escapes into Botswana as a little baby with her aunt, and grows up in Botswana, gives birth to my father and his two other siblings. We remain refugees. We are not diasporians. That's a decorated word. We are unable to return to Namibia because conditions are not suitable for us. We are not diasporians. We remain refugees. As our parents were refugees, so are we refugees. 120 years later, we are still refugees. We are being called everything else. That is not true. That I'm able to walk in here, and maybe that I do not meet today's definition in the UN Charter of a refugee does not make me any less of a refugee. I am a refugee. I am a child of refugees. I am a refugee.
How do you feel when you hear that the liberation struggle people that went out of Namibia 1963 with our independence have returned to Namibia, and they were given money to start their own businesses in an amount of 250,000 and some of them were given farms and houses. And by this, when you guys who went in exile, I can say exile, because you also went to look for a refugee in all those strange countries. When you want to go back, when you want to come back to Namibia, you are not given the same treatment. How do you feel about that?
Well, if there is any resistance against the Germans, it was started by my forebears. They are the first to stand up against the Germans, and they laid the foundations of the later liberation struggle under Sam Nujoma and those of his grouping. But we are hardly recognized by that. I'm saying that it is most unfortunate. You know, recently we were trying to register a genocide foundation in Botswana. The government of Botswana wrote us a letter that I'm still holding and said, no genocide ever occurred in Botswana. When we come to Namibia, the Namibian government says, you are not citizens of Namibia, and therefore we are stateless people, virtually. We are not just, we are simply stateless persons. If Botswana says, we cannot stand up for you on this matter, Namibia also says, we can only do it for Namibian citizens. Maybe rightly so. So the Namibian government does not even want to recognize our existence, where we are. You know, even when I have been in Botswana for 29 years since Namibia became independent, and I'm a very prominent church minister in that community. I've not even been invited for an independence dinner at the Namibian High Commission, not once. Do they recognize our existence in Botswana, and that we went not as tourists but as victims of a terrible war? No, they don't. They don't. It's convenient for them not to recognize us. So yes, I think even then, I'm not asking for it. Even then, I'm just hoping in my mind, at the bottom of my heart, that if I want to return to Namibia, it mustn't be such that I will be told, you are going to settle in Grootfontein. When I come back to Namibia, I must look for my relatives. I must look for where my grandmother came from, where my grandfather came from. See if I can connect to those people and return, because I'm returning to family. I'm returning to people who are close to my family. Not just return and then be put in another concentration camp-like arrangement where government has decided to resettle me. That's not what I would like to come back to.
They are saying, they can't afford. You have asked a very relevant question in terms of citizenship. We are saying we are the refugees of the war. So the government, they must be able to change the constitution of Namibia to allow the dual citizenship. Because some of us, we never been in Namibia. All our life, we are in foreign countries. So to just abandon our citizenship in those countries, it's a difficult situation. So the constitution must be allowed a dual citizenship, which allow the people outside the country who are the refugees of the Ovaherero and Nama to can voluntarily apply for the citizenship. Now they beg us to say we are not patriotic enough so that we can get the citizenship, which to me is just the opposite of the truth, which is actually the lie. We are very much patriotic. Our families, our forebears have told us about Namibia, how they lived at that times. They were peaceful. So it's us also in diaspora, we are also peaceful to Namibia. So nobody is patriotic more than us in the diaspora. There is a situation which doesn't allow us, all of us, to be repatriated back to Namibia. And we are not against those who want to be repatriated to Namibia. We support them, but even now with the independence, go to those areas of Gamaland where the people of our people are staying. There is no development there. So we don't want to come in hardship situation because we have adapted already to hardship where we are in the foreign countries. So that's why we are saying we advocate for dual citizenship, and in our lifetime will be achieved. Why the Germans, the white people, are given the dual citizenship and not us, the black people. So we think Namibia belongs to Africa. Namibia should also know about us in the diaspora. We are not we don't want to be relegated to second citizenship. We want to enjoy all the democracy in Namibia. We are so patriotic, and nobody must judge us to say we are not patriotic.
If ancestry decides nationality, then we are also German, like you, because we are descendants of German men who were sent here to promote the German Empire, empire rule. So we are also German. We may be slightly darker in complexion, but who says we are not? And so we are not only demanding Namibian citizenship, we are also demanding that Germany should consider us as people that are likely to return to the lands of their grandfathers. If one German man slept with an African woman and with a European woman, both those children have the same ancestry. So we also feel that we have a German ancestry, and we are part of that part of Germany that Germans have neglected. In those of us of Ovaherero and Nama origin that are remaining here, many of us have German blood flowing in our veins. That should also be recognized.
Because this is something that in Germany is not so much known. The fact how many women were raped here. Can you perhaps say something more on what effects this also had when the women were raped and then children were born of the people who brought all these violence here as well, if you want to?
There are a lot of women who were raped. You must know the soldiers, when they came here, they were only men soldiers. They didn't bring their families. Actually, their families came very late in the 1920s. Most of the women came here. But the majority of them, they forced those women to sleep with them. It was not a matter of love and things like that. So we are told that most of the Germans, they even raped those women. So my pastor here is very right that we can't even say we demand only the Namibian citizenship. Majority of people could easily also become Germans. So because of our forebears, what they did to each other. Yes.
I suppose we don't have numbers, and we don't have numbers, and it's far beyond our point. You see, the whole thing is that whereas the Herero history in Namibia is well researched, the Herero history in the diaspora is hardly ever researched. It's a chapter that has not been opened, so we cannot tell exactly how many people we are talking about here. But the thing that I got from my grandparents very clearly is that women who gave birth to children who were lighter in complexion immediately, by virtue of that, became victims. And so those would be the first group of women to be eliminated, either while expecting a baby or immediately after giving birth to a baby. Both the mother and the child would be killed if opportune. My own grandmother and her parents were pursued precisely because they were carrying a child that was lighter in complexion. So a good number of those women, we cannot even begin to guesstimate at this point, because those were killed immediately. By the Germans, yeah. By the Germans. You must know that the Hereros were fleeing on foot, and the Germans were either. The 1904 is a point at which a good railway construction projects were already in place within Namibia, and that Germans were either on horseback or a better mode of transport in their pursuit of the Hereros. They also had the gunpowder, which the Hereros did not all have, and which the Hereros could only capture if they happened to get a group of Germans and capture it from them. So yes, a good number of us was killed. I mean, Hereros are cattle rearing people, you know. They hardly arrived with one cow in Botswana. All the cattle they have now, it's cattle they got while there. So all their cattle wealth was lost. And cattle, goats, sheep, all that was lost. And you must also understand that coming that poor, that desperate, they were the first victims of migrant labor into South Africa, into places like Kuruman, Kimberley, Vryburg, where they were working on asbestos mines and manganese, and there again, they died because of the diseases that they got from breathing that air that of the environment that they were working in. So large numbers died. Even now, a call is on in Botswana and South Africa that all the people who know that their parents used to work for these mines should come and claim some benefits. And that just tells the story that in our part of the world, virtually all the men that were either people that left here or immediate descendants of those people have died because of those that survived, because of the labor conditions in South Africa.
To say, or is it okay?
I don't think it's okay. There's something to say.
Is there something you still want to communicate or to say? Or, I mean, I think from our side, we thank you very much.
With one question,
Yeah.
I would
Yeah, maybe.
because you were talking about the mining and so on, and I was wondering, like, what symbolizes, for example, the Kalahari, the Umahika, for you? Is it a sacred place for you? Like, how is I mean, of course, there's a lot of traumatic, the landscape, but I read that there are in the future it's planned to build mines there. So for me, this is like a repetition before this genocide is acknowledged. Like, how do you feel about it?
You see, I would like to get a group of people about my age, just for once, maybe 5 or 10 of us, to just come into Namibia and walk through the desert to Tsabong, to feel how those people felt. Just walking, women and children were able to do it. So if 10 or so of us could walk, retracing their steps into Bechuana land, and so as to also say to the many that nobody knows even where they are lying, to just say, we are here, we have survived, and we are still trying to tell your story. The Kalahari will forever, for the Herero, remain a sacred place because of the many, many women, children, and men, many who were wounded and still fled and died in the desert. Many people came with their thumbs cut off, with their feet cut off, with their ears cut off. Many people came bearing all those kind of marks, I am told, into the place of refuge. And even for those of us who really survived, if you go to South Africa or Botswana and I say to you, this is my cousin, I'm literally only saying that this is the person that came along with my parents. Because nobody knows who is related to who, of the people that escaped. You became relatives because you fled together. You understand what I'm talking about? Because it was really a tiny fraction of the community that fled. So we are not even sure who we are connected to how. At times people will intermarry when they are real, very close relatives because nobody ever told them. They have never been able to discover who is who. I just also hope that we could do a genetic mapping of the Herero in the diaspora, so that we can see who is German of us, for example, or some of us are maybe only light in complexion because we the Boers of the Africa of South Africa also did the same to our women. So because of that, maybe we need a genetic mapping of some kind, so as to understand who we are, because we don't know that at the moment. And so I'm thinking that's where I am with things. But we really need to, in my lifetime, I hope we could unburden ourselves and offload the burden that our parents carried, and offload the burden that we are still carrying. And I hope that my two little boys will not take my experience into their future, that they and the German children will be able to meet wherever they meet and join hands and walk together as brothers and sisters, instead of people that represent two enemy camps, which we are today. We began as friends. We received you thinking you were friends, though later you turned on us with your powerful weapons. Let us go back to being friends again. This meeting proposes that our journey started, our meeting was the meeting of friends. Can we end it as friends again? Or are you forgetting about us because you have made new friends in Namibia?
I want just to wrap as well, because I heard you were speaking about how secretive the Germans are in terms of educating their children back in Germany about the Ovaherero and German War, that the younger generation, they don't know anything about this genocide. So we are making an appeal. We are making an appeal that the Germans, this story must be told in Germany. That is the appeal which we are on. I was privileged to receive this German student in my trade union, the National Union of Mine in South Africa, which I took them through where the Ovaherero people were staying because they didn't know. I even gave them the website to read for their educational knowledge, which actually they appreciated very much. And they even told me the same story that they don't know about the Ovaherero German genocide. It's true that it's the time that you in the media fraternity, you are able to tell the story. So in my conclusion, I say, thank you for giving us this opportunity to tell the story, our story. Perhaps it would be educational film for our own good and for the German good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All that I can say, I want this message to reach every German citizen, every German citizen living in Namibia. I want everyone to start thinking twice when you are raising any point about the Herero and Nama genocide. Thank you. I hope it will reach the right people.